good morning, good evening, or good night, whichever one it is for you, whichever one it is. I'm very glad you're here to join me for this week's video, because today I thought we'd do a little bit of a check-in of all of the books I've read so far this year, and just like this mid-year freakout tag thing that everyone does around this time. I have the questions here up on my phone. I got them from the Carrie Can Read video. I do not know who the original person is to credit for this. I am not the one who came up with that, but I think that's quite obvious. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The first question here is best book you've read so far in 2025. And to be very honest, that's such a tough thing to pinpoint because I have been reading so many good books. I cannot believe how good this year has been in terms of reading for me. First of all, because I wrote down some of the books so I wouldn't forget, I reread quite a few of my absolute favorite books of all time this year. Those I'll just get out of the way first because technically I don't know if they really count, because I think this tag is more supposed to be the books that you're new to, but still I think they deserve to be mentioned. In terms of rereads, my favorite books so far this year were No Longer Human, The Brothers Karamazov, and Letters to a Young Poet, which are three of my favorite books of all time. Then, in terms of new books, okay, this is where we're really gonna get going. First of all, The White Book by Han Kang, one of my new favorite authors. The White Book is basically Han Kang's meditation on the color white. White is a sort of stand-in for grief and destruction, but also purity and hope. It's a very philosophical and fascinating book to read. It's on par with No Longer Human in terms of how much it's comforted me reading it, and it's gonna be one of those books I reread often. I already know that. The writing is stunning. The philosophy in it, anyone should read this. It's such an incredible story. Now, my the book I also cannot stop talking about is Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. This is the story of a man who reads so many books about chivalry and knighthood that he becomes crazy and starts to believe he is a knight himself. And he takes this lackey of his, he takes this random dude called Sancho Panza, and he takes a horse from his stable, a very not so stunning horse, and together they go on an adventure. Don Quixote is such an incredible character because he's so kind and he's so pure. He really just feels like a little kid, but he's a grown-up man. He's in his 50s, I think, or something. He gets himself into all of these ridiculous situations that are entirely of his own making. He never really manages to help anyone. In fact, most of the time he makes things worse for them or creates problems where there never were any in the first place. The most incredible story. It's so funny, but so heartfelt, and it makes you feel so warm inside. It's such a comfort read for me, and also one I will definitely be rereading very often. And also, because I cannot do this video without mentioning this book. This is a very recent read. It's Ulysses by James Joyce, which in terms of best books of 2025, I think this is the best book ever written. Objectively, it's not a book I had a lot of fun with just because it is quite taxing to read because you do have to engage your mind a lot reading this one, but it's incredible. It's basically 900 pages of James Joyce writing about a random day in Dublin. We follow three main characters, Stephen Dedalus, Leopold Bloom, and Molly Bloom, and each of them is sort of a stand-in for a different character of the Odyssey. The language itself is the most experimental thing I've ever experienced. James Joyce invents words, sentence structures. He constantly switches up the way he writes. I am in such awe of this person because I have no idea how someone could be intelligent and crazy enough to write something like this, but it's such a gift to have this because I really do think this is maybe the most unique thing that's ever been created in words. If you feel up to it, maybe pick it up. I don't know. I think it's worth it. Okay, that's it for the best books. Now, best sequel you've read so far in 2025. This is kind of difficult because I do not really read series. And the only series I really read this year, I actually started in December. So technically the second book I read in December, so I cannot count that, which is why literally the only book that I could consider a sequel is Raising Demons by Shirley Jackson, which is one of her 2 autobiographical accounts of her life with her children in the 1950s as a housewife and a female writer. It made me feel so happy, so pleasant. It was so vastly different from anything else I've ever read by this woman. Shirley Jackson is one of my favorite authors, and I've read everything by her now. These were my last 2. They're semi-autobiographical. They aren't actual real accounts. They're just heavily inspired by her real life, and you really get a sense for what kind of person she must have been. It's the most intimate account of her as a human, not just a writer. Even if you don't like Shirley Jackson's usual works, this is so vastly different. I do think this has such mass appeal. I don't think anyone wouldn't like this story. Let's see. New release you haven't read yet but want to. Honestly, because I mainly do read classics, and if I read a contemporary story, I really try to make sure it's gonna be something I like. I don't really have an answer for this one, but if I had to pick, I'd say The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. I've heard so much good things about him. I've seen some interviews he did, and I have such respect for this man. It's definitely a bucket list kind of thing. At some point in my life, I'm definitely going to sit down and read everything he's ever written. I know he writes the kinds of stories that I'll really, really like. So yeah, Emperor of Gladness is the only one that really applies here. So moving on, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. The only thing I can really think of is, technically, if you really squint your mental eyes, then you could say Never Flinch, and that's what I'm gonna say, because Never Flinch came out, I'm pretty sure, the 1st or 2nd of June. And it's the only new release I was really, really excited about this year, because Stephen King is just, he never misses. I love his books so much. That being said, Never Flinch actually was kind of a miss for me. I've read it already. I didn't really enjoy it that much. I think it was in need of some very heavy editing. I think there were storylines in there that didn't need to be there. But at its core, the story was interesting. It had some really good things to say. This situation happens where a man was wrongfully imprisoned and killed in prison, and someone on the outside is now going to be taking revenge for that murder of this innocent man by killing 13 innocent and 1 guilty. We're also following a different storyline where there's this feminist activist called Kate who does this tour around America doing these feminist talks, and she basically has this stalker who keeps threatening and actively trying to take her life. It all sort of merges at the end, and in itself the core was nice. It's just definitely not gonna be a new favorite Stephen King of mine. Yes, moving on. Biggest disappointment, and just you wait, because I have been waiting to talk about this book somewhere for the longest time, but I have not found an opportunity yet, so brace yourselves. My biggest disappointment, and not just of this year, but of all time, is Naomi by Tanizaki. I became kind of interested in it because I heard it's a sort of Lolita, but the woman is the one manipulating the man. I don't think I'll ever want to read Lolita because I know the story and I know it's supposed to be written beautifully, but I know myself and I know that's not the kind of story I'm gonna like. Lolita, but the woman is the manipulator, felt sort of interesting and like a different take on this kind of story. And so I thought, why not? I love Japanese literature. This is a Japanese classic. I'd never read a Tanizaki. You follow this man who's in his 30s, who falls in love with a 15-year-old waitress who he likes because she looks Western. That's really all. She looks Western and she looks young. And basically gaslights and manipulates her into marrying him when she's, I think, 16 years old. When she gets older and grows up and matures into a person that doesn't align with his idea of who she was when he met her as a little girl, he becomes really disillusioned with her and wallows in his own sorrow because this young girl he manipulated starts acting irrationally and erratically. I kept looking for the moral of this story because I thought it was so obvious that at some point he was gonna turn this around somehow, that you see that was the whole point. How messed up this kind of dynamic is and how it ruins everyone's lives. But no, the book basically just continues to be the author trying to make you feel empathy and pity towards this poor adult man who is being taken advantage of, being so sad that she is now taking all of his money and ruining his life and his job and his interpersonal relationships. I have no idea what Tanizaki was thinking writing this book. Naomi is not a book I would ever recommend. Okay, moving on. My biggest surprise. Okay, for this one I actually have three. The first two are the Aeneid by Virgil and Paradise Lost by John Milton. And they are surprising because they both became favorite books because I fell in love with both of these. First of all, the stories are incredible, but also the writing. The writing is insane, and the writing is actually why I am talking about these at the same time, because to me they feel really similar. Simply because my edition of the Aeneid was translated by John Dryden, who lived in the 1600s, which is when Paradise Lost was written. So these two feel incredibly similar because they were written in the same kind of English. The Aeneid follows what happens after the war on Troy, but from the perspective of the Trojans. Because basically Aeneas goes on this journey trying to find a place where the leftover Trojans can exist. It's kind of similar to both the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's inspired by both because the journey he goes on is very much reminiscent of the Odyssey, but the whole origin and just a lot of elements in the story are very reminiscent of the Iliad and inspired by the Iliad. And so if you like those two stories, which I really did, I love them both, especially the Iliad, you're really gonna like the Aeneid. And then Paradise Lost is the story of man's fall from paradise. You follow the devil being exiled from heaven and then trying to take revenge on God, but being powerless against God. And so he decides to take revenge on man instead, because man is God's masterpiece, and so that's the closest he'll ever get to hurting God. It's such an incredible story, first of all, because of the writing. There's so many insane quotes. The one I keep mentioning everywhere because it's just my favorite, and I'm gonna take this opportunity to mention it again, is "A dungeon horrible on all sides round, as one great furnace flamed, yet from those flames no light, but rather darkness visible." That is insane. That quote, in my opinion, is one of the best quotes ever written. I love it so much. And the entire story is like that. It's just one insane quote after the other. Satan is my absolute favorite in this story. Incredibly surprising, both because I loved it so much and just because of what it is. I think it's such a special story, so I highly, highly recommend it. That's Paradise Lost. Now, the last book that surprised me is actually going to be Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. It's a surprise because it's dystopian literature. Sort of. It qualifies as dystopian, and that's usually a genre I stay away from because I do not like that. I don't like stories about modern things. I love classics because they feel like an escape. Never Let Me Go is one of those books that I don't think you should know anything about going into it. We follow Kathy. She's in her 30s, and she's telling us about her life story. It's one of the most heartbreaking stories I've ever read. It's one of those stories that really hold up a mirror to the worst aspects of humanity. It's such a heartbreaking, devastating story. It leaves you feeling so hopeless and so just empty. So this had to be here. With that, let's move on. Oh my god, yes. New favorite author. I found a new favorite author, and no one's gonna be surprised if you're not new here because it's Han Kang. Surprise, surprise, I fell in love with Han Kang. If you don't know, Yukio Mishima has been my favorite author for a really, really long time. But I discovered Han Kang. I have yet to read The Vegetarian, but everything else I've read that is available in English. I fell in love with this woman's writing and just her personality, who she is as a person. I've consumed any interview I've gotten my hands on from her, and what she has to say about humanity and life, and what life means and trauma. Her books are so quiet and so profound and emotional and so human, but so devastating. She writes such sad stories in such a special way. I've never read anyone who's been able to make such devastatingly horrifying books feel so beautiful and so dignified. And I think that is such a testament to how intelligent she is, both emotionally and in terms of IQ. Yeah, I love her so much that she's the only one who might rival Mishima for my favorite author, because it's just... I love her work so much. Now let's see, what is the next one here? Newest fictional crush. And boy, do I have one, because I did read The Count of Monte Cristo this year, and Edmond Dantes is by far my favorite fictional crush of this year. He's maybe the only fictional crush I have developed that I haven't already had. He's so intelligent, so incredibly intelligent to the point where you kind of want to get angry at him because it's just, how is that fair? How can someone be that smart and that talented and gifted and hardworking and, I don't know, just brilliant and so kind, but he has so much trauma and he builds all of these walls around himself, but in its core, it's kind of clear that although he kind of wants to not have a heart, he still very much does. And the people who are kind to him, he will do anything and everything for them. If you cross him, though, you're kind of gone. It's kind of hopeless for you, because if he has a grudge against you, he's gonna get his grudge fulfilled. I can't even speak anymore. He's just such an attractive character to read about. He's so, you cannot read 1,000, what is it, 400 pages of a book and not fall in love with this main character who just, he's made so human and so likable. Yeah, okay, we're just gonna move on from that. Newest favorite character. A kind of similar question, but actually a different answer, because who is surprised? It's Don Quixote. I love that man so much. He's such a precious character. I think I've already kind of said everything of why I love him so much, but it's just, this is a comfort book for me, an absolute comfort book, and he's such a comfort character because he's very much not perfect, but he's so pure and so pure-hearted, and he really tries to do kindness, and intentions are really worth all. It's just, I love him so much. Okay, next up, book that made you cry, which is a list. I did not bring any of the books down here because honestly, it's kind of more of a question of which book did not make me cry, because I am one of those people who I will cry at anything and everything. But I have written down some of them, so let's just do a little bit of a quick fire thing here. We have Human Acts, Never Let Me Go, No Longer Human, The White Book, The Count of Monte Cristo, Piranesi, and Heaven Official's Blessing. They're the ones where I'd say crying doesn't really qualify. To me, crying means I'm gonna have to put the book down because I'm gonna need a minute. Because currently I cannot see the words on the page because I'm crying that much. And the kind of book where even after I finished it, if I think about it too much, it's gonna make me cry again. In this list, we have quite a few different kinds of crying. So Human Acts and Never Let Me Go are devastating cries. Like cries that you feel like they're gonna break you. Like you will never be the same. Some part of you has been altered. These are books you will probably never reread again because they've broken you that badly that you cannot do that ever again. But books that had such a profound impact on you that they have altered you. I'm not dramatic. I don't know where you would get such an idea. No Longer Human and The White Book are more like quiet cries. I don't know quite how to explain that, but it's more like being underwater, kind of drowning almost. The Count of Monte Cristo and Piranesi to me are also similar just because of you follow these characters being traumatized and being hurt so bad. At their core, they're such good people and they've never done a thing to deserve what's being done to them, and you feel for them so much and you just want the best for them. It's the kind of empathy cry where maybe you can't necessarily relate to them. Okay, Piranesi is very relatable. If you have any kind of mental health issues or have ever been devastated by anything or hurt by anything, I think Piranesi is really one of those books that I think is an incredible allegory to mental health and also kind of a love letter to the brain and how our brain protects ourselves. I think it's one of the most incredible stories, but those two kind of make me cry in a similar way. And Heaven Official's Blessing, that's the kind of book where I don't even have to read it. I just have to think about it and I'm gonna cry. But it's a happy cry. It's the kind of cry where I wish I could be in that story. I wish I could travel back to ancient China and to this fantasy world that has been created there with all of these people that feel like my friends and just live there and experience that. The best kind of cry. This is a really satisfying kind of cry. That being said, now we have book that made you happy, which is also quite a lot. Heaven Official's Blessing also qualifies here. Then Raising Demons and Life Among the Savages, that duology by Shirley Jackson, definitely they made me so happy. I loved being in those worlds or in that little semi-autobiographical world, I guess. Don Quixote, Absolutely. None of the books I've read this year that I had not read before have made me as happy as Don Quixote. But I'm gonna shut up about Don Quixote now. I'm very sorry. I'm a broken record. The Three Musketeers also made me happy, just because it's very funny. Dumas is just an incredibly funny kind of character. Also, just like Don Quixote, such a ridiculous kind of story, but it's funny because it's ridiculous. And also, one I have not talked about is Anne of Avonlea. First of all, how stunning is this? Anne of Avonlea is the second part of Anne of Green Gables, which is kind of a series, but I had only read Anne of Green Gables. This entire story is just precious defined. It's so happy. It makes you feel so wholesome. These books always make me very, very happy. I'm gonna keep it concise and keep it at that. Most beautiful book you've bought so far this year. I have so many beautiful books. I think most books are really, really beautiful. But if I had to pick, let's go through this. I have been slowly but surely acquiring the currently being released special editions of Heaven Official's Blessing. That is the first one. Oh my god, sprayed edges, look at that. This is the second one. Oh my goodness. The back, and then also here, sprayed edges. Then the third one, which is the last one of them I currently own. Just look at it. It's stunning. Also sprayed edges. And look. That I don't own books with sprayed edges, so this is so cool to me. They match up. They make an image. Isn't that crazy? I think that's so cool. I can't wait to have them all because that's just gonna be so satisfying. These are my favorite books of all time. It's an 8-part series. These are the books that I basically know by heart. Ever since I discovered them like 3 years ago at this point, I have reread them maybe 6 or 7 times. Like, it is crazy. I am obsessed with that story. I basically know it by heart. I feel like I know these people, like I have lived in this universe, like they are all my best friends. At no point in time during any part of the year do I not have to actively repress the urge to reread these. Like, I could right now sit down and just reread them again. It's such a complex story, but to put it very concisely, it's about Jelan, who's a god, or he is just ascending to heaven for the 3rd time at the start of the first book, which means he has been demoted from heaven 2 times before this point. And he's a very controversial character in the heavens because that offends the gods, that someone has been, first of all, talented enough to ascend 3 times, but also has done bad things enough times to be demoted from heaven 2 times. And so our main character, Jelan, is kind of being hated on by everyone. He meets this man, this ghost king. A god and a ghost king. Do I have to say more? I don't think so. We basically live in a world where the gods are in heaven. People and ghosts share Earth. So you're kind of split up between these 3 realms. And you follow Jelan's story. You also learn what happened in his past. And you follow the relationship he develops to this ghost king. Besides the fact that this is one of the most intricately crafted universes with the most alive and human and relatable and special characters ever, it's also the best love story I have ever read. I do not usually like romance books, or not, I don't, it's not like I don't like them, I just don't tend to read them very often. I tend towards different kinds of stories, but Heaven Official's Blessing is, in my opinion, the best. I think maybe the problem is I read it too early on, so nothing I've ever read compares. What is it about Heaven Official's Blessing that I love so much? Just everything. Everything, in short. I have now used this this opportunity to ramble on and on about a book which really didn't have anything to do with this category. I was only supposed to tell you about beautiful books, but in my opinion, these are so beautiful. They are currently being released, so most of them aren't even out yet, and I'm just gonna gradually accumulate them all as they're being released. But Heaven Official's Blessing. Now you know. Now you officially know. And this is something that's probably never gonna change, what my favorite book of all time is. I'm gonna stop talking now. You can really, I think it's very, very clear in these videos which kinds of books I really love. Because when I love a book, I will not shut up about it. I'm really, really annoying like that. The last question I have here is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? These are the books I would really, really love to read. The high priority books that I may not be reading over the next few months, but that I would really, really like to finish by the end of the year. But do give me some leeway because there are some big ones here and I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to get to all of them. But in an ideal world, I would really like to read 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Nurul by Susanna Clarke, who's the author of Piranesi. Then The Song of Solomon, which is really a stand-in for any Toni Morrison. I do think I'm going to start with this one. It's either going to be Song of Solomon or Sula, but I would really, really like to read both of them by the end of the year. I really don't want this year to pass without me having read at least one or two Toni Morrisons. Then Just Above My Head by James Baldwin, because James Baldwin is a very new discovery for me. I had never read James Baldwin until last month when I read Giovanni's Room, and then this month I've just finished Another Country, and I loved both of those stories. He has such a, James Baldwin has such a unique take on humanity. They're so raw and real to the point of almost being brutal, also just so heartfelt and empathetic, and he writes people in such a vivid way. I would also really like to read If Beale Street Could Talk, if I get to it, among all of the books I have still left to read this year. And yeah, with that, that's kind of it. I think those are all of the questions. I've kind of talked a lot. I hope I haven't annoyed you. This is the video that I used as an excuse to talk about some of my favorite books, some of which I usually don't have a place to talk about. Now I've found an opportunity to tell you about them, so you're welcome, or I'm welcome maybe. It's more of a treat for me, I guess. Thank you so much for being here. If any of those questions have answers that you'd like to share, then please tell me. I love the exchanges with you guys. They really make me happy. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for giving me this space to talk about books. As always, I really highly appreciate that. I hope you have a nice day. If you don't have a nice day, that's fine too. I'm thinking about you either way. And we'll see each other again very, very soon. Until then, bye.